Hello, my friends. I hope you're having a very productive week reading through the first few chapters of Luke. This week we are looking at chapters 2 through 6, and you're going to see a lot of repetition here, things that you've already read in the books of Matthew and Mark, but you're also going to see some new things that you will find only in the book of Luke. So I hope you spend some quality time this week digging into the Word of God and allowing Him to speak to you through His Word. So in chapter 2, we begin with the birth of Jesus, and we see the story of the shepherds and the angels. Very familiar story. And then we see Jesus being presented in the temple. And then we see Jesus as a boy at the temple, and really this is the only window we have into Jesus's childhood, is this one episode of Jesus as a boy in the temple. Outside of that, we really do not have a lot of information about Jesus as a child. And from there, Luke jumps to John the Baptist. So we go from Jesus being born to Jesus at the temple as a young boy, and then to John the Baptist preparing the way for Jesus beginning his ministry. So we see John the Baptist, we see his story here that we read earlier in the books of Matthew and Mark. And then in chapter 3, in the middle of chapter 3, I believe it's the middle, actually it's the end, chapter 3 ends with one of those dreaded genealogies. So as we said in the book of Matthew, genealogies were important in ancient times. Genealogies showed lineage. So as you read through this genealogy, just pay attention to some of the names that are listed there. Notice how many names Luke presents in his genealogy. In chapter 4, we get to the temptation of Jesus, and we see Jesus being rejected in Nazareth. You see Jesus driving out an evil spirit, and then Jesus continuing with some healing. So let's back up real quick here. We see what happens, the progression that takes place here in Luke. We see John the Baptist preparing the way. We see the genealogy, the baptism of Jesus, and then the genealogy. And after the baptism, Jesus moves into the wilderness to be tempted. And then after the temptation, he begins his ministry with the driving out of evil spirits and the healing of many. And then in chapter 5, we begin to see the calling of the disciples. He calls Simon Peter. And then we see him with a man with leprosy. He heals a paralytic. He continues his ministry. And then we see the calling of Levi. And then he begins to get questioned by some of the religious leaders. And then in chapter 6, we finish up the week with Jesus talking about the Sabbath. And then we see the 12 apostles, a listing of the 12 apostles, or the 12 disciples, the 12 whom Jesus calls. And then he gives us the blessings and the woes, which is very similar to the Sermon on the Mount. Then he talks about judging, he talks about the tree and its fruits, and the wise and the foolish builders. So there's a quick summary of the 5 chapters that you should have been reading this week, and I hope that you can join us Thursday morning at 9 o'clock here at the church as we discuss some of these chapters, and I'll give you the opportunity to ask questions and just to have some informal discussion on these. And as always, I hope that God continues to bless you as you read through His Word.